Good evening. Today is Tuesday, March 14th, and I apologize for starting a little bit late. It's 7:40. I'm going to take roll call. Director Madavi? Director Madavi?
Here.
Director Deppie?
Here.
Director Sharaswat?
Here.
Vice President Tassai?
Here.
All right, thank you. All members are present. Are there any public comments on items not in the agenda? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Catherine de Neergaard, and there's several things that I'm very concerned about that are going on right now. The single thing I continue to be most disturbed about is this in this district's governance, just as I was disturbed and spoke out against it in the Harmon era, is prejudicial treatment of women as citizens, employees, and officers, and in the Harmon era, but not now, female board members as well. Currently, two people at district headquarters have a history of partiality and violence against women. One that has been spoken about is current interim Chief Hull, and two of us women begged this board not to hire him as interim chief because of experiences of partiality against women. Both of us as citizens. Since then, a number of things have gone wrong or come to light, including the 2003 arrest of Hull for domestic violence, the $90,000+ for the Chia lawsuit, and a number of other things that are making that are continuing to be carried out in district headquarters. And now I understand that there's a female officer that is suing the district, and I also have heard that there's been some unpleasantness toward a female employee. And we also have apparently a contract hirer, Bob Dice, who's currently being investigated for violence against a woman. And frankly, the story as it appeared in the paper was very, very plausible. I see guys like doing that. And so I'm very disappointed that the women on this board are letting other women be exposed to this and continue to be exposed to this. We need to get rid of the threat of violence against women coming from the police department or the hires of the district. Particularly, I ask you to get rid of Bob Dice and to hire a police chief who is trained to be a police chief. My second concern is that I'm concerned about the board president on her own calling for various investigations in the media that rightly first should be done by the chief and department, and then, if needed, discussed and addressed by the board before taking any steps. And instead, Board President Notley, I understand that I don't understand, I've seen it with my own eyes, that you've added to Peel's yellow journalism calling for investigations. And a lot of the things he says, many of us no longer believe because we know he's not getting his facts straight. The recent article about Officer Foley's alleged altercation last Saturday, it was just full of falsehoods. And by making these allegations and making trouble in the yellow journalism, you're both adding to potential lawsuits and costing potentially Kensington taxpayers money, making us look bad in the paper, and lowering our property values. I mean, who wants to live in Kensington when it's, such a mess? And I think even it could encourage criminals to come here, because here's a disorganized mess going on with all these misbehaving people.
Thank you. We have a 5-minute limit.
Okay,
so-
one last sentence. It is the police department's business to investigate what is going on, including using clates. And until it's sort of proven, I don't think we should talk in the newspaper about it. Thank you for listening.
Mabry Benson here. There's a vocal segment in Kensington who think that our police officers can do no wrong. Yet there are many examples that contradict this assertion. There can hardly be anyone who isn't aware of the Reno incident when an officer had his badge and gun stolen by a prostitute and was reportedly involved in an altercation with her and her pimp the next day. The COP declined to cooperate with the Reno police in that matter. Then there was the traffic stop, in quotes, when officers Barrow and Ramos stopped board member Cordova in Berkeley for a fix-it type of offense. COP Hart initiated an investigation which was just a whitewash. And we learned that an officer leaked information about Clet's data searches and then lied about it. The point there is that there were 9 illegal Clet searches from 2014 to 16, starting before Cordova was elected to the Kensington board. Why was she targeted? Was this because she was first the darling candidate of a certain K faction, but a month later she was considered a pariah? Don't those 9 Clet searches over 2 years support that the traffic stop was intimidation of a board member? I ask about this. What is being done to implement controls so our officers don't continue to make unwarranted Clet searches? Then, very recently, there was the display at the Saturday Matrix presentation by one of Kensington's finest, calling Mr. Brady a liar about his call data and getting quite hot under the collar in the ensuing discussions. Is this the sort of temperament we want in our officers, one who loses it so easily? Not me. Yes, many officers have done nice things for some citizens, but that is their job. In spite of many examples of inappropriate police behavior, I cannot understand why this vocal segment is still giving them their support. I, for one, do not accept these sorts of behavior as those of a quality police department. The Matrix report itemizes many structural problems and deficiencies in our department. Many of these are inherent in having such a small department. We need to acknowledge the problems and work together to find ways to provide quality policing. Thank you.
Thank you. Tell me if it's too loud. I attended both Matrix presentations. At the end of the Saturday presentation, I was alarmed to witness an officer who is paid by our tax dollars being so disrespectful to the Matrix consultant and to the general manager of the district. I cite this as just one more inappropriate way an officer serving our police department has behaved. There are numerous examples of inappropriate behavior, and I think Mabry mentioned quite a few of them. Let me be clear. I do not question the officer's right to disagree with the conclusions of the Matrix report. It is the way he voiced his lack of agreement that is alarming. Is this the kind of behavior that we find acceptable? The officer asked the Matrix consultant where he got his data about the number of calls during the night shift. When the consultant tried to explain, the officer blurted out that the numbers were flat out lie, and it was in a very aggressive tone. Were his comments intended to embarrass the Matrix consultant or the board by challenging the accuracy of the data? What about the appropriateness of a citizen's arrest of the general manager? Did a 70-year-old man really pose a threat to physical harm to an otherwise fit, active police officer who could have been carrying a gun?
He was off duty, so he doesn't carry weapons.
Off-duty officers are permitted to carry weapons. And you may ask this officer here.
Well, he wasn't carrying one, just for the record.
I didn't frisk him. I would not know. Did you? Please tell me. Maybe you have information that I don't have.
I'm going to ask everyone, including directors, to please not interrupt the speaker. Thank you.
It appears that the officer was very easily provoked by the matrix numbers regarding average calls during the night shift. I wonder whether the officer was familiar with the data in the Brown-Taylor report of roughly 10 to 12 years ago that presented similar numbers for downtime, or what the matrix report labels as proactive time, that officers have when they work the night shift. Is a display of being argumentative and easily provoked an acceptable level of behavior for an officer who identified himself as a representative of the Kensington Police Officers Association? When the officer challenges the matrix consultant with, "Your numbers are flat out wrong," is this an acceptable way to disagree? I don't think so. Let's remember that police officers carry guns when on duty, and they are also allowed to carry a gun when they are not on duty. Shouldn't we expect a higher standard of behavior and expect a better display of good judgment in our law enforcement officers just because they do carry guns? Do we want officers who get so easily provoked that they are not making good judgment decisions? Ask yourself whether you want to have an officer on our taxpayer rolls who cannot be relied upon to exercise good judgment on or off duty. The measure of one's performance is not what happens during the ordinary course of performing one's duty. That's what they're paid for. That's what we all are paid for when we work. The measure of anyone's performance is what an employee does and how he behaves, she behaves, when challenged with something unusual. I had one very fast comment, and that is, I attended the special meeting on February 1st, that special session, and I was the first speaker to offer a public comment. The minutes that are in the agenda packet do not reflect my stern rebuke of Mark Costantini when I noticed that he stood up with his camera and was poised to photograph the speakers. I would like the minutes to include the reference to my rebuke of Costantini.
We have time for one more comment, and then we'll take public comments after the business portion of the meeting, the remaining public comments.
I'll be brief. My name is Philip Zimmerman. I don't need this very much. Can you hear me on this thing? I would think so. Thank you for your help. I'd like it to direct your attention, perhaps a redirect, to the name of your special district, Kensington Police Protection District. That's what you're here to run. And what did you say? Sorry. It seems like I'm overpowering it, that's all. My take about this matrix report is that it's not simple, and that it has, you could simplify it into two headings of what I'm interested in. One, it's made some suggestions with regard to how the district could be better managed. That's a great idea. Money well spent. Secondly, regarding the possibility of following, as I understand your directions, to seek the possibility of outsourcing some or all of police functions for Kensington. I think that's a very suspect idea, and here's why. I don't think there has ever been in recent memory, my recent memory, a majority of our citizens, much less general agreement that that ought to be pursued. I further submit that if you do something like that, my guess is that at the next election, that action will become a very significant aspect of what's debated before the election, and that any directors running for this board who support the continuation of that will lose, and that the next board will repudiate any action you take of that sort. So, at least take a referendum before you go forward with it. The other thing, one thing more, and that is, that said, I think you've gotten all the recommendations of value that you're likely to get out of Matrix, and that you ought to tell them, stop the clock, send us a bill, thank you very much. Don't spend any more money on it.
Thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda will be board and staff comments, and I'm going to ask our interim chief of police to make his report.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments as to the progress on a couple of things that we're working on right now. There has been some movement for the emergency evacuations plan, but it's not complete, and we'll be working further on that and going into the future. I also want to make a quick comment on recruiting. We have made a provisional job officer to one applicant. That person will be starting on the 1st of April. There's also 2 applicants currently in the background process, and there's a potential on a 3rd applicant that may be starting the background process. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And now our general manager report.
Yes, Madam President. As everyone is aware, the Matrix did have 2 community meetings, one on Thursday evening on February 28th and one on Saturday morning on March 2nd, to review the information that they had in their report and to answer any questions on the report. The options that they discussed were improvements, both operational and staffing, to the current department, contracting for some services in the police department, what they call a hybrid approach, and also the possibility of full contracting the department. They also discussed the possibility of some areas where there were potential savings. The cost estimates that they used were best estimates because obviously we do not have any proposals that are actual numbers. So they were estimates based on their work in other jurisdictions, developing costs for contracting services. Our intent is to bring this back to the board with Matrix with some options for the board to consider, probably in April. I don't think we're going to be able to get this completed in the next week, but in April we should have before the board some options, and then the board can direct staff in terms of these options, which ones you select or prefer. And I had at least one letter from a public member that I included on this topic. It's included in your packet. On the California law enforcement telecommunications system, we have authorized an investigator to look at the alleged improper access. And the investigator has commenced his work and is making an independent review of these allegations. We don't have a time frame established yet, but he's progressing very rapidly, so I hope to have a time frame and conclusion for you, possibly a conclusion as early as the next meeting. I don't know that for sure. And we also need to discuss what is disclosable and not disclosable from this report. So that process is well underway. I've also included, and by the way, there's another letter from a public member included on that topic in your packets. I've also included a revenue and expense report, which was completed effective as of January 30th, and was shared with the Finance Committee at the February meeting, and it includes this new format that's easier to follow and read, and it includes this column at the end, which it's the projections for the year are, the expected expenditures are projected. And this report, our intent is to present it on a quarterly basis, so we don't have it quite underway, but we hope soon to have this regularly to you on a quarterly basis, and also to the Finance Committee. The draft audit we hoped would be ready for the next Finance Committee meeting, but I understand that we're not going to be able to make that date next week, so we'll have to have that draft audit to the Finance Committee at a later meeting. But it is progressing well, and it's just the details haven't all been ironed out yet. And then finally, we did remove some poisoned oak and non-native blackberry at 2 locations, and I want to acknowledge the president of the board for assisting with that project. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, please go up to the podium.
On an additional note, I do make a recommendation to members of the community to have the board review 5.0. I do have a recommendation that the board, members of the community should have the board look into 5030.41 as a significant inconvenience to members of the community that cannot speak after 20 minutes. I think that was enacted after I left as general manager and chief of police. My name is Kevin Hart, former chief of police and general manager here. I'm only here for a quick moment in reference to a newspaper article and specific comments made in that news article. It is good to see a lot of great people that I got to work with here, and I'll have to save that because I want to try to keep it brief. The specific headline says that it was a private expert called an extremely egregious police abuse of power for what they articulate as 9 accesses to CLETs. That's under my watch, so I'm here to explain, all right, pretty much everything, because all of it is public information now. Let me start with, all right, a comment that Madam President, you made to the press, that you felt that it was an egregious point, an abuse of power in reference to a CLETS hit on a vehicle before an individual was even a board of director. Here is the picture of that particular CLETS hit from 2004, and I will give this to the general manager as I leave. This has expired registration on here at this time from 2014, beyond 6 months. Here is California Vehicle Code 226510 of the California Vehicle Code that says it's towable. This was number 1. You want to talk about numbers? This was number 1, all right, hit. Here is a picture of a text that then now retired corporal sent to the then chief of police that said there's a car that's parked on the street with expired registration, and I believe it belongs to a potential candidate for board of directors for the police board. 1 week after was the election. Everyone knew who was running for election, all right? It says specifically, all right, I'm not mentioning names, but it does say, all right, information is on Franciscan, everyone knows where that's at, with expired registration, all right, and pending master file. Let's not, this is to the chief. The chief says, let's not push the button, she might get elected. Which is an understandable point of view. We're not trying to cause problems. The police department, at this point certainly didn't want to cause any problems. So it was stopped. That citation and towing was stopped. Again, that was number one. This is all public information, Tony, all right, from a previous opportunity. All right, and then the last comment from the individual was, it's towable, just saying. So for someone to allege and articulate that they're a victim, they're not. They are, in this case, a violator of the California Vehicle Code. This isn't a problem with the police department for this individual. This was the individual. And again, this is all public information, and I just want to make it the record straight, because now I'm implicated, and the inference to this article, all right, is misleading, mischaracterizing me as the chief of police. And I want to set the record straight, which is why I'm here. Lastly, I'll talk about the other numbers. When you say 9, 2 of which, Madam President, didn't even occur within Kensington. 2 of which did not even occur. One of them was for the day before the traffic stop, which was widely known, all right? One was for the day of the traffic stop, which was widely known and obviously categorized by a speaker already tonight, Ms. Benson. And the third one, all right, directly around that, was the day of, the second time of that day, when the individual officer, after the board of directors came in extremely upset, the officer said, after she left, the officer said, Chief, here it is, it's expired. At that time, the vehicle registration, what we saw was expired registration. What I later learned as a result of the investigation was she had registered that day and cleaned up the registration. So I'm not here to cause grief, but I'm here to set the record straight relative to, all right, the other times, and that there's an alleged that it was a number of times. While I was your chief of police, there were no violations of CLETS, none whatsoever. And then just for insult to injury, the vehicle was parked in the gas station for a number of months. The officers on routine patrol would make security checks of vehicles that are parked there, make sure they're not broken into. All right, that was one of the other hits. So I make myself available to the investigator, all right? I don't have copies of any records. I didn't keep any copy of records. This is all information that I've obtained through open source documents. All right, thank you.
Hi, thanks. I just came to my first meeting quite a while in January.
Right now, we're only taking comments on the general manager's report.
I was told that if you emailed the general manager, you could have an item put on the agenda. 2 of us emailed the general manager asking for the same thing, a report on the community's response to the last Matrix meeting. And when I asked Tony why it wasn't on the agenda, he said it was part of his general manager report, which we just heard. And I haven't heard a single word about the community's response. And seeing as only Cyrus and Sylvia came to either of those meetings, Cyrus came to both, you, the other board members, didn't hear the responses. And so I feel like we need some time to discuss that. It's not a few people saying they like the police. In the Matrix report, 85% of the residents are happy with the police, and 78%, this isn't
Please,
from the
please,
report.
while a
This is
speaker
from
is
the
speaking,
report.
please don't interrupt.
78% are responsive, and I feel that, it was very clear that at the end of the Saturday meeting, the question was asked, is there any downside to simply hiring a competent chief of police and having him phase in some of your recommendations? And the response was, there's no downside to that. Given that, and we're now 3 months into yet another extension of our interim police chief, what are you planning to do about that? I think we need to discuss that tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Are we going
It's not on the agenda, we cannot, thank
It
you.
was asked to be on the agenda, and I was told it would be on the agenda if we asked for it. And so how do we do this?
Well, items are agendized, just not at the they're agendized at the recommendation of the general manager when they
No,
fit in the
that
calendar
wasn't
of the
what I was
board.
told. I was told if I wanted something on the agenda, all I had to do was email the general manager. Two of us independently emailed the general manager. It's not on the agenda, so we can't talk about it. This is not right. You are really in breach of your fiduciary duties here. You are not spending the money on the police that is budgeted. Look at all the problems we have. The tension in the town over this issue is not going away. It needs to be discussed and needs to be dealt with, and I hope we can do that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Board comments? Does anyone want to make a comment?
I do. I want to remark on the unfortunate and untimely passing of community member Julie Moore. Julie was a dedicated community volunteer. She owned the Circle Salon, but she was a big proponent of and booster for children's activities in the community, as well as supplying flowers for events at the Kensington Community Center. And we will miss her beautiful arrangements and welcome contributions. So our condolences to her family. I want to note that next Tuesday is a Finance Committee meeting. I believe it's in this building at 3 p.m. So we welcome you to attend.
I have got a couple questions. Tony, you mentioned for the matrix options that you were going to come up with some options and present to the board. I would hope that in that discussion with the board, we might have some suggestions as well, so we won't be limited to just what you come up with. I think that, I'm sure that you'll have some. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, the purpose of the options is to help guide the discussion. It's not
Right.
to limit your choices.
Okay, good. I see in the second letter that's included in the general manager's report that you offered to forward, I guess it was from Dane Gillette, his comments to the investigator. And I'm wondering how can other citizens, if they have comments, get their concerns passed on to the investigator?
They can forward them to me, and I'll pass them on.
Okay. And I've got some, if we're just talking about the general manager's report, I see that those emails were to be included in the general manager's report, which they are. But are they also on the agenda? Because I see in the agenda there's something about correspondence for discussion and possible action. I'm curious what that's about.
That was an item from Director Modavi, that he asked that item be included.
Which correspondence is it?
Our policy on correspondence.
Ah, okay, policy. Okay.
Yeah, that includes also the policy on minutes.
Okay, that was my second question. Okay, got it. It's kind of a mundane issue. I feel bad bringing it up in something. But we have separated the monthly reports from the agenda, is that correct? They're not part of the agenda.
I'm sorry, would you repeat?
We've separated the monthly reports from the agenda.
Yes.
So is there any reason to tie them to the meeting schedule? Because if they're monthly reports, and let's say we don't have a meeting in the first half of the month, we have to wait until our meeting to produce them, and it seems it might be handy to actually have them come out the first of the month, if they're monthly reports, and not have them, tethered to our meeting. It's kind of a remnants of when they were part of the agenda, but at this point it seems might as well just put them on the website or wherever we put them first of the month, and then people have access to them the whole month.
That's a fair comment, thank you.
Oh, I had an agenda request for next time that's actually quite important. Could we please put on the agenda a discussion of account 835 of consultants? I'm unfortunately not part of Finance Committee, and I can't talk in Finance Committee, so I guess this is the only place where I can do that. So, yes, I'd like to have some concerns about that.
Hey, could you repeat that?
Account 835, the consultant line item.
All right, if there are no more board or staff comments, I'll move on to the consent calendar, and I've note, Celia, he gave it, yes. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Moving on to the consent calendar, we have the minutes with the amendment that you requested. And we can move on.
Actually, I
Any
want to
other
pull the
comments?
minutes. We're going through this rodeo again. I'm pulling the minutes.
All right. You're pulling them for what reason?
Okay, well, I actually had several questions about them and concerns. I'll start with the very simple question of who generated these minutes and in what way, because again, suddenly we're now not even attributing it, and as we learned last time, someone or somehow it's being produced. My second question is, are the original transcripts for this available at the Public Safety Building? Because again, I wanted to pull those before the meeting to review them. And I'm assuming if this was transcribed or if it wasn't, you can let me know. And then lastly, the last question I really had is has the board all read this and are they satisfied with the minutes as they're written?
Madam Chair, the purpose of this item is this simply to adopt or amend the minutes or not approve the minutes.
Okay, then
Those
I
items
shall
can be
bring up my
discussed at a
concerns
later
that
item.
need to be amended. For example, there are multiple weird tense changes throughout the minutes and missing syntax like punctuation marks. There's also some rather odd statements. I just selected some that I guess caused me to pause the most. I'll read a few. There are tons of upsides to owning and maintaining paths and liabilities, the need for maintenance. And then there's no period and then a separate sentence begins. There's another one. Sometimes the district also relies on external contracts or external parties to think about. Then another one. She spoke to both Tony and the chief to raise the concern she spoke to both Tony and the chief to raise the concern raised, and the community has raised, and it is important. And then another one, it's important to try to get that out for everybody, comma, really. And I have an annotated set of the minutes here, if everyone's thinking I'm just making this up as I go along.
No, we'd be happy to take those annotated minutes and make the corrections, if that's what you would like.
Well, I would suggest that whoever wrote it, which I believe someone did, take a good look at that.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
There's also a sentence that I brought up that's missing, which discussed the paths and the fact that there were a lot of lawsuits associated with the paths, and that's one of the reasons that the board had not pursued that. But it brings up, I mean, I know we're just discussing the minutes, but I think we need to discuss the problem with anybody taking verbatim words and putting them into their own words. You're always going to have disagreements. We've had this time and time again. I remember, I forget who it was, I think it was Leonard actually, who came and said there were some important comments missing, and I don't think it's really the fault of anybody who has to do it. The minute you take a verbatim transcript and start paraphrasing and condensing, someone's not going to be happy. And so I think it's a practice that's just outlived its usefulness. We should either have actual verbatim, really transcribed minutes or action minutes, but anything in between, it's actually worse than no information. I think if you have incomplete or inaccurate information, it's worse than no. We've got the recording on the website, we've got the video. We don't need someone's interpretation of what happened. So I can't accept these minutes either.
I will say that if you are going to do a verbatim transcription, then it's a transcription, those are not minutes. And so if video exists and audio exists, then the purpose of the minutes could be to record business, to record action, and to summarize the discussion. But the video and audio serve as a record of everything that was said. So a transcription, a verbatim transcription are not the same thing as minutes.
I think we should save this for the discussion later.
This is addressed also in the new draft PPM.
Yes, that is true. We are working on the policy and procedure manual and hope to present a draft hopefully at the next meeting, that will cover this policy.
All right, so we'll pull the minutes. The next item on the consent calendar is to adopt resolution.
Madam President, I think, or the minutes are not going to be, you will not act on approving or amending the minutes?
Are we amending them per
I think we need to take a look and amend them again.
Cyrus
You
provided
can-
all the amendments.
You can approve them subject to the amendments that Director Madavi
Do that, yeah.
recommended.
They're not all amendments, they're all like, some of them I just highlighted things that were kind of off and.
And there were punctuation
I should mention, I listened to the audio to see what was missing from mine. I haven't listened to the whole audio and compared it with what's written here, which I think is what's necessary if we're going to accurately vote on it. Unless everybody has actually listened to every word of the audio and compared it to this, I don't see how we can approve it.
Well, the fact is, I've read the minutes, but the fact is that individuals should object. I cannot object on behalf of another citizen about their comments
Oh, right.
and interpretation. So I can only object to what.
I know, right.
Yeah.
It just brings up the problem.
So
Sometimes
let's just
not everyone,
pull-
we don't
we'll
always
just
speak
pull-
that way.
Let's just pull the minutes, and we will address that later. All right. The next item is to adopt Resolution 2018-09, authorizing, let's see, it is a resolution of the Kensington Police Protection Community Service District authorizing the adoption of the updated Contra Costa County Operational Area Hazard Mitigation Plan. We approved this, but we didn't sign the resolution. And so I now would like to move that we adopt this resolution.
I second the adoption of Resolution 2018-09.
Aye.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, it passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to old business, we have the community center renovation update. Director Hassai, would you like to present that?
Well, mostly I would like to introduce Bill Glass of Glass Associates, who has been our architect and working on this project with us for quite some time now. And I'd like to let him present, and then, of course, we will have opportunities to ask questions and get clarification.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm Bill Glass. I think a number of you have attended previous meetings, and I'm pleased to be here again. I'd like to give you a quick update on the status of the project. Many of you will know this, but we'll go through them. We did bid the project. The bids were, sorry? Is that better? Okay. We bid the project last month. Bids came in on February 20th. The project was announced on the 2nd of January, and it was posted in 3 locations: the West County Times, the Daily Pacific Builder, and the San Francisco Chronicle. There was a requirement that the contractors who were interested in bidding attend one of 2 mandatory pre-bid conferences and walkthroughs of the project. We had a number of different contractors attend. I think it was 9. Of the 9 contractors who attended and were eligible to bid, we got 5 bids. In alphabetical order, the bids were from CWS Construction Group Incorporated, $1,825,050. Eagle Builders, $1,481,200. EVRA Construction, $1,794,000, excuse me. JPB Builders, $1,256,375, and KCK Builders, $1,531,000. The pre-bid estimate was just under $1.3 million. Over the course of the first 10 days of evaluation of the bids, in which we were obligated to narrow the list to 3 and return the bid bonds to the other bidders. During that period of time, JPB, which was the apparent low bidder, requested that their bid be withdrawn, and they gave a reason for that. That was reviewed by council, and council agreed, and I would have recommended that regardless, probably. So now the apparent low bidder is Eagle at $1,481,000, and the second low bid is KCK at $1,531,400. The third low bid is EVRA at $1,794,000. So the apparent low bidder is about 14% over the pre-bid budget, pre-bid estimate that we had provided. Unfortunately, the bid that was withdrawn was a little bit below that estimate. Had the bid from that bidder been accurate according to how they explained the mistake was made on their part, it would have been about 4% over the budget. So for the apparent low bidder, for information, there are 9 bid alternatives, and I'll run through those quickly. The first bid alternate is for new flooring for this room, the meeting hall, $13,000. The second bid alternative is for new flooring in meeting room 3 without the ability to discuss the bids at length with the bidders, because we have to be careful what kind of conversations we have with the bidders. My speculation would be that the bid alternate actually includes this room and that room, and it may have been a misunderstanding on their part. Bid alternate 2 on their part is $13,500. Bid alternate 3 is for the casework at this end of the room for storage, and that is $52,000. Bid alternate 4 is integrating the existing AV system into that cabinet work, should that cabinet work bid alternate be accepted, and that's $6,500. Bid alternate 5, new fireplace insert and related work at the fireplace, $22,000. Bid alternate 6, a new fireplace insert and a mantle, $28,000. Alternate 7, the new screen partition that we discussed during the design for the back end of the hall to provide privacy for people coming and going from the meeting rooms to the restroom, and that is $57,000. Bid alternate 8, new acoustical ceiling tile for this room, $28,000. And alternate 9, a new exterior building sign, $27,000. We are obligated to select a successful bid by April 20th. That's 60 days after the bid date.
Isn't it 14 in the letter? Sorry to interrupt, but it says contract.
You don't have the most recent version. That's slightly corrected it's April 20th. And actually, 21st would be the 60 days, but that's a Sunday. The general contractor scope does not include abatement. There is an abatement consultant who put together a program for abatement. The abatement contracting work is being bid separately. Most of that work can go on prior to the beginning of construction. The scope of that work will depend on whether the district accepts the bid alternates or not, or which bid alternates the district accepts, if any. And some of that work would have to be coordinated with the contractor during the construction phase. So that's the status of the project. If there are questions from the board.
I have a couple of questions. At what point are we able to speak to the lower bidder to clarify any of these bid alternates?
I'd have to discuss that with Ann.
Okay. And are we able to award or deal with this contract only at a regular meeting, or could we call a special meeting for this if necessary, given the time constraints?
You could call a special meeting for the award. I can speak to your earlier point. You would want to award the contract before you start discussing the bid alternates, because the bid alternates do not figure into the award.
Okay. And lastly, could we push the date to the 21st, since the 20th is a Sunday?
No, it's the other way around. 21st is a Sunday.
Oh, 21st is a Sunday, 20th is Saturday?
20th is a Saturday.
So if the 20th is a Saturday, could we go to the next business
following
day
Monday would-
afterward?
I believe you could only if the bidders agree. We
Okay.
want to get their concurrence.
I mean, it doesn't really matter in the end. It's a Friday or a Monday, and we should be able to get this done.
I had some questions about, generally, how much does abatement run? Especially given that I believe,
I can only refer you, actually, Sylvia's been in contact with some of the abatement contractors, and she might have some budget information. My insurance company becomes apoplectic when I talk about abatement, so I just can't.
So we don't have bids yet from them. There are elements of the abatement, again, as Bill Glass said, that are required by the work. I think that I've seen one estimate at approximately $46,000 for all of the required abatement work. If you give me a moment, I'll look and see if I can come up with anything more certain, but that's what I remember.
Any other questions at the board?
actually just had to do with funding. When you go and sign a contract, don't you have to have all the money already on hand to pay them? I don't know, I'm new to this, I'm just trying to figure this out.
And Ann can correct me, when you bid a public project, you have to have the money that is in the engineer or architect's estimate available. That money is available in some fashion to the board for what was in the budget. So beyond that, the board would have to act to accept this bid, which is higher, the board would have to act on the additional financing that would be available or that would be necessary.
Question about the new floors.
Mm-hmm.
What does new floor mean? What's the material? What's it like?
We've specified linoleum for the floor, which is a greener material than vinyl tile. Presumably vinyl tile would be a little less expensive, but this floor that you're looking at and standing on and sitting on is a second layer of flooring over the previous floor, and under that floor is the problematic mastic that has the asbestos in it.
I can update on the numbers. Again, these are just estimates, so the required project, the base project, the abatement work is, as I expected, about $45,000, $45,600. The estimate for the floor tile, 2 layers, and the mastic removal, if this floor was chosen to be replaced, would be $36,000. I mean, those are just estimates. We should, we're pushing to get bids as fast as possible.
So just for clarification, it would be $45,600 plus $36,000?
If the 36 would be for this floor only.
Okay, and meeting room 3?
I don't remember if meeting room 3, I believe that meeting room 3 does not have a problem. It's
Meeting room
much
3,
later.
yeah, meeting room 3 does not have an asbestos.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, yeah. So roughly speaking, the asbestos, the demolition of this floor and the asbestos removal is not quite 3 times the cost of the new floor that will go down in place of it.
And then, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for coming.
Now we have comments on the financing with Bill Zanoni. Thank you. Jim, can you go to the microphone, please? Thank you.
So when you're talking abatement, you're talking about the floor here, and you're talking about asbestos abatement in the floor? Is that correct?
Well,
And
yeah, there's other abatement issues.
this is the major area here, I assume. I assume that this is the major area where the abatement issue. I have some more questions.
The principal areas that require abatement are the roof flashings around the perimeter of the roof and the roof flashings at the skylight, as well as the floor. Sylvia, what was the third? I'm drawing a blank.
There's something under the skin on the outside.
That's right, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's a skim coat of plaster. It's a very thin coat that goes over the concrete block on the outside, over which there is paint. Where we are disturbing that for the removal of this wall, that has to be taken care of so it doesn't become friable, get into the atmosphere. So those are the three areas.
So this abatement includes work on the floor, and so my question is, there was a lot of talk about whether or not we should replace this floor. I'm assuming you're not talking about a full replacement of the floor, but maybe you are. You are. So the costs that we're talking about for the full replacement of the floor, to include the preliminary cost, the abatement issue is about $47,000?
No, there's two abatement figures. There's an abatement figure for the pieces of the project that are already what we call base project. And that figure for all the flashings, the skin coat that he just talked about, was $45,000. If this floor was chosen to be replaced, if the board chose the bid alternate to replace this floor, the abatement of the floor would be $36,000 additional. So there's $45,000 of estimate, again, these are estimates, of required abatement, and then if the floor was chosen as an option, then it would be a $36,000 abatement.
Okay, so the number that we're looking at here, does that include the costs for abatement? Because at one point here it was said that at this point we don't know those costs because they're going to have to be bid separately.
That's correct. So we're getting bids. The numbers I'm talking about is just an estimate, is one person who's not bidding who gave us an estimate of what, in his professional opinion, what he thought the cost might be.
So the costs that were in the packet that we got include that estimate?
No, they do not.
Not.
But we had always determined that the abatement and hazardous material removal would come out of the franchise fees, not out of other set-aside fees. So that would be the determination.
Please, there's a lot of talk that's making it hard to hear the speaker.
So while this is an expensive figure, it is within some of the franchise fees that we have set aside and determined always that waste removal was acceptable use of those fees.
Okay. I'm sorry, this is my last question. But there were approximately 9 items here that were talked about.
For the bid alternates, you mean?
Yes.
Correct.
Are any of those numbers in these numbers that were in the?
No, so the
Those are all add-ons.
those would be add-ons. That's why they're split out separately.
And just to repeat, the selection of the contractor has to be made on the base contract, the basic scope of the contract, and not on the bid alternates. And some projects, given the structure of the bidding, you end up with what's called a closed bid, and you can make a selection based on the combination of the basic scope and whatever selected bid alternates you might want. We were unable to structure the bidding for this project in that fashion. Any other?
I have a rather stupid question. Why can we not keep the existing flooring and just place a new floor over it? You wouldn't be having any problem with the materials there?
We are considering the replacement of the flooring only at the request of some of the members of the community. The floor is not in terrible condition and certainly could be left as is. To put a third layer of flooring over a floor that is already 2 layers is not a practice that we as the architects would recommend. The district can do that at their discretion, but not with our approval to do so. It's you're pushing your luck a little bit when you put a second layer over a first layer. To put a third layer over, it's not what would be considered a best practice.
Are there any other questions, Steve? Okay.
I apologize because I don't know quite the scope of work you're doing in here, but one of the questions, one of the comments, I guess, would be, you have 1.3, all the bids are coming in higher, the abatement's going to be more. Is there any idea that we may get into change order territory that makes any sort of projects cost, like drop dead contract, you can throw it out the window and it can increase your cost substantially. So is there any, I didn't see it, so I don't know, clipping the trusses to the wall, whatever you guys are doing, I don't know the scope yet, so I apologize for that, but is there anything there?
The contractor's bids include a 15% contingency. That number is not there for them to use as they wish, but if something comes up on the project that is unforeseen, and we have those funds available, there would be an approval on our part as your architects to allow the use of contingency dollars to take care of a contingency. We've also advised the district to carry its own 15% contingency. So that number is in the budget numbers that'll be, I think, discussed by Bill. There will be change orders. There has never been a public job without a change order, so just...
Okay, we'll take one more comment and then we need to move on. Yeah, thank you.
2 things. I did not understand what you said about the bidding process. Okay.
Which part of it?
At the very end, you said you need to understand about the bidding process, and I didn't understand.
It was the
I think
element
the
of closed bidding. So
Yeah.
can I try to explain this? So if I can paraphrase for Bill, we could have structured the bidding 2 ways. The first way that we did structure it, and I'm not sure if it was a choice or was just how we ended up doing it, but the first way was we are required to take the lowest bid on the project that we have identified as the base project. That is how we structured it. There was another possibility of making the bidding process so that we would have to consider the base project and the bid alternates and looking at them together to create the lowest bid. But the agreement and the funding was so uncertain for so long about what we would possibly do with bid alternates and how we would fund it that we chose to just make the choice on the base project.
Okay. The second question I have, once the project started, who is going to be the on-site person to make decision on various alternatives or additions and so on and so on? Our general manager works 2 days a week, and somebody needs to be available to make decisions. Who is that person going to be?
Bill will explain that, and there'll be a certain point at which I believe he's in charge of making sure that the contractors are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. If there become questions, concerns, they have to be raised to a higher level. That will be Tony, and potentially he'll involve me or a board member if necessary. But Bill is our project manager, but there's an understanding that some decisions he cannot make on behalf of the community.
Another question then. If you are the person, are you authorized to make the decision without checking with the rest of the board members?
Well, I think this is the discussion with the general manager. It depends on what those decisions are, but this is basically a project, and this is, staff level, if that's fine. If we choose to tell Tony that a certain thing, he has to come to the board. I mean, we haven't worked that out exactly, but Bill is in charge of the day-to-day on-site oversight of the project on behalf of the district.
Okay, because things are happening once you start construction, and decisions need to be made and be made quickly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. All right, and now we have Bill. Okay.
It has to do with the franchise fee, and I think Rochelle said that the franchise fee would cover the abatement costs, but if you look at your budget, it may cover the abatement costs for the bid, the regular bid material, but it wouldn't cover if you added the floor in.
No, I'm aware.
Okay, I just want to make
That's
sure.
just this year's budget, yeah.
Right, but you're going to have that money this year, right?
But that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Director Hassai, do you want to introduce?
Yep. So for folks who don't know Bill Zannoni's been working with us for maybe at least a year now, or maybe more. He is a financial consultant helping to develop budgets, helping us streamline and create better formats, and has worked with us to track and think about the financing for the community center over time.
Thank you. So what I wanted to do is just kind of quickly run through the finances to date for this project. These numbers are still preliminary. We actually have a finance committee meeting scheduled for next Tuesday afternoon, and hopefully we will have some more information when we meet with the finance committee next week. But just a little bit of background. The board has over the past 7 years allocated from reserve funds $940,000 for this project, and that started off in 2011-12 with a $300,000 set aside of funds for this project in whatever form it was going to take whenever it was going to occur. In 16-17, another $150,000 was allocated. We're showing right now $200,000 in 17-18, but I'm looking at minutes from the finance committee meeting back then, and I need to clarify that. I think there's some discussion whether the budget in 17-18 included $200,000 or $350,000. So the numbers that I'm presenting this evening are on the conservative side with $200,000 in 17-18. And then this year in November, the board authorized an additional $290,000 toward that project. Of that amount, $158,000, I believe, was funds that were going to be advanced until the district receives Measure W funds? WW funds. Of $158,000, and those will be reimbursed to the district after the fact. So to date, we have at least $940,000 set aside in reserves for this project. While we've done that, we have incurred expenses getting up to this point. We have incurred to date, just a little bit under $172,000 in architectural fees. We've expended $28,000 to Contra Costa County for the work that they've had to do and the permits that they've had to issue. We've spent $3,700 for environmental costs and about $33,000 in other costs related to getting this project to this point. So the total of the expenditures to date is $236,819. We've also identified additional costs that we haven't, or that you haven't expended yet, but will could be incurred to get you up to the point of construction. That includes about $47,000 of architectural-related fees and an estimate of hazardous materials abatement, the actual work, the testing and the inspection of $51,400. That includes the $45,000 that was just discussed, as well as inspection and testing of about $6,000. So we have about $98,700 of potential additional costs to get us to the point where they start to work on the building. So as far as the funds available, assuming we have $940,000 that the board has already earmarked of district funds, with the $236,800 that we've spent, the $98,700 that we think we could be obligated to pay, that leaves us $604,500 available of district funds to move into this project right now.
I'd like to clarify something with Bill. The $47,000 in architectural, is that all due before construction begins? No. So it's, yeah, outside of construction, but not necessarily. It's okay, I just want to make a point.
Not related to.
Yes, that's fine.
Could I ask what those fees would be for, the pre-construction architectural?
I'm sorry?
What, the pre-construction architectural, what would those funds?
Bill could explain better, but this is part of the remainder of Bill Glass's contract, as well as a small amount of other expenses, but most of it is contract related.
Yeah, we haven't finished paying off.
Okay, all right.
Initial contract.
All right.
Yeah. I don't have the amounts of our fee at my fingertips, but our fee has been increased only by the cost of reimbursable expenses that we have incurred on the part of the district for prints for the county, to post the advertisements in the 3 locales that I discussed earlier, and then I believe a small consulting addition for the electrical consultant having to do with the fire alarm that was requested between the point that we really finished the drawings and when we bid the job. It was $1,700 or $2,000, somewhere in that regard. The rest of our contract amounts have been previously, I think they're public record, and they've not changed.
We owe you, I have some of those numbers, not the third that you suggested. We owe you currently $43,300 left in unbilled fees.
Right.
And reimbursement for project notice notification, $3,970.
Right.
Okay.
So the remaining fees are to, we don't supervise construction as architects. We observe and report, and we're actually taking on something of a management role for the district, but we will be spending time throughout the construction phase monitoring the work, being here on site, receiving submittals of product data and information and shop drawings and the like that have to be reviewed and approved before the contractor can proceed. So that's what we do during the construction phase of a contract, and happy to answer questions about that if you have further questions. The construction phase will, we hope, start within 10 or 15 days of the notice to the contractor, and it should run, if it's on schedule, 156 days. There are likely to be weather delays and other minor delays having to do with coordination with the asbestos people. So there's probably another 4 weeks on top of that I would expect we should be prepared for the delay in the project.
Can I ask one more question from Bill, actually? The architectural costs, I'm assuming that's just for this iteration of the renovation. It doesn't take into account anything that was spent on the Measure L or previous?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I interrupted. I want to make sure Bill gets a chance to finish, so go ahead, but I do want to let Bill finish as well.
Just a quick one from what that Bill just said. I'm pointing to him, if we're on tape. You said that you're going to be involved in monitoring the project, but you guys don't really do PM, project management. That's not your specific thing. Well, the reason I'm mentioning this is I think the community needs to have somebody very adept in construction inspection. And I'm not saying I don't want to do it, but I do it. But the reason I'm cautioning is construction right now is awful. And you don't want to get in a defect case because that takes years. So we want to make sure it's done right. The quality of labor out there is a little suspect, and I have tons of experience in this. So having somebody that's there for the community that can monitor the construction processes, assemblies as they go in, is really critical to not lose money and have a product that isn't up to speed or won't last. So, and I know architects, I work with them, and I know what they do, and I know how they monitor, but there really is a need for somebody to keep an eye on what happens. And some contractors go and they do piecework, and guys work on weekends unsupervised. They work until 7 o'clock at night unsupervised. And that doesn't lend itself to good construction. So, and I only mentioned it, like I said, because I'm in the business. I don't want to do it for the community, but you guys need somebody.
I would mention that no, we don't supervise construction. No architect does. Supervising construction is what the contractor does. Supervising construction is telling the carpenter to take the hammer and drive that nail with 3 strokes or whatever you want to, however you want to exaggerate it. But we do monitor the construction, and we're going to monitor this project to a closer degree than we would normally be contracted to do. My associate, Farhad Dowd, is a Kensington resident. She's 5 minutes away, and I suspect she'll be here almost every day. I'll be here probably once a week. But we will, we will observe and we will monitor the construction on more than a regular basis.
Thank you. I want to let Bill Zanoni finish his presentation.
Sorry, this is probably not the interesting part, but to pick up and keep going, we have $604,000 of district funds remaining, and then to that, the district either has received or will be receiving donations in the amount of $255,000 plus another $210,000, so $465,000 from the Kensington Community Council, $10,000 from the Kensington Improvement Club, $35,000 from the fire district for alarm work, and we've identified right now $10,000 of solid waste franchise fees for debris removal. So with those numbers, that gives us funding available for construction of $1,124,000. So that's what we're looking at right now. We're going to research this $150,000 that may be added to this. It's sitting in undesignated fund balance right now, but we believe we have at least $1,124,000 available, or will have that available for the construction portion of this project.
I'm not going to jump in on you here.
Okay, so then taking that number forward with the 3 lowest qualified bids that Bill walked you through, ranged from a bid amount on the low side of $1,481,200 up to $1,794,000. And we've added an additional 15% contingency on top of that, which brings the 3 lowest bids to a range of $1.7 million up to $2,063,000 with that contingency in it. So taking our $1.1 million that we have identified as available, that means that we need to come up with additional funding somewhere in the range of $578,000 to $938,000. Included in those numbers are the bid contingency, which we may not spend, and that is $220,000 to $270,000. So if the district were to, or the board were to decide to fund the bid contingency amount out of reserves, then the additional outside funding would range somewhere from $428,000 to $788,000.
The contingency should be available, but that's its purpose. It's to be available should it be necessary.
Only if it's
And that's on top of the 15% already in the bid.
correct. So we know there's going to need to be some outside funding. What we are doing right now and what we hope to be able to report out to the Finance Committee next week is our alternatives for funding the unfunded portion of this project. We've already spoken with the California Special District Association, and they have provided us with actually a very good low interest rate for a 10-year financing for the unfunded portion of this project. And I'm hoping to get quotes from at least 2 additional banks by tomorrow. So when we meet with the Finance Committee on Tuesday afternoon, we will be able to present funding alternatives and the cost of those alternatives, and then also discuss the timeline so that we can come back to the board, ideally the end of March, with a recommendation for, if this project goes forward, how it's going to be paid for.
Oh, I have one quick question about the loan.
Sure.
What is the collateral on that loan expected to be?
So a funding like this, typically for a public agency, the collateral would be this building. You pledge an asset as collateral, so we most likely what you would pledge, it's like taking out a loan on your house, right? Or you pledge your house as collateral, so that's most likely what this would be. So it would be a 10-year financing with the community center pledged as collateral. I believe that's how it would look.
Is that the known collateral they will take, or is it that they can pick their collaterals as they want?
You'd have to have district assets, physical assets, at least to the value of what you're borrowing. So we could do something else if there was something else that had.
We're not offering the police cars.
Right.
No, I'm just asking,
Right.
we're not giving away the police cars. I'm just curious, is it that what we choose, or is it that what they would automatically choose?
We would offer alternatives to them, but this seems like the logical alternative.
So, oh.
Okay.
Linda Lipscomb, have you analyzed any of the possibilities for the repayment of that debt? Sources? Would it require an additional assessment or whatever?
We've looked at one scenario was $450,000 10-year $450,000 10-year financing at the interest rate we were quoted, I believe, was 3.8%, and the annual debt service payments were just about $59,000. That is something that the district at that level could manage in your existing operating, but without an additional assessment.
So I wanted to note that Bill and I, Mr. Zanoni and I were discussing the funding shortfall, and I provided him with some documents, and I'm very confident that the funding shortfall listed here actually should be $150,000 less, because it seems from documents from 2017 that that was the will of the board, and that was our intention to move those funds into the account. So that would bring our funding shortfall to $382,004. And then I want to clarify for people who are concerned, we have approximately $1.5 million in unrestricted funds. we could afford not to take loan.
Is that
on the lowest
the reserves?
estimate. No, that's unrestricted reserves. That's not money that we have set aside into various categories. That is untethered. We'll have a perfectly accurate presentation of those funds to the Finance Committee next Tuesday, which will then come before the board. But the purpose of taking the loan is that we don't whittle down our reserves and take that $382,000 out of those funds, that we leave that alone because the interest rates are so low. And
This agency has a very, very strong level of reserves. Your operating budget is just over $3 million, so your reserve, your undesignated reserve right now is just at 50% of your budget, which is very, very healthy.
We've also...
You're in a good, not that you want to go spend it all, but you're in a good position right now.
We have also ensured that there is no prepayment penalty should there'd be a desire to pay that off faster if that's possible based on cash flow and other things, because we've certainly been taking, or over the years been setting aside a large amount of reserves for the project, and as that goes away, there will be a building up again, and so we could pay early without prepayment penalties.
Financial institutions that loan money to public agencies are very careful, and in fact, what we have to provide them are 3 years audited financial statements and our budget, and they look very carefully at our ability to repay before they loan us money. So we've had preliminary discussions with one, and they seem very comfortable with this agency's ability.
And I would point out that each of the items, for benefit of the board, each of the items that come up under the Government Code, under the Brown Act, Section 54954.3, Subdivision A, requires that the public be able to talk about that item before or as it's being discussed. So I'm taking my opportunity here. My question is, we seem to have a lot of unrestricted funds at this time. We're in good financial shape. We are also down officers, which is our major cost. That's where our funds go. Does this work take into account a change? Interim Chief Hull tonight talked about somebody starting, I hope, April 1st, and a couple of people in background checks, and that costs a lot of money. The reason we have this money is we have remained understaffed. Thank you.
The reason the reserves have increased the last several years is because of salary savings. But when we did the budget for this fiscal year, we budgeted full, assuming that all authorized positions were filled for the entire year. And even with that, the budget documents you can see on the district website projected a surplus of about $90,000. So even with full staffing right now, our revenues are more than sufficient to cover our expenditures.
A question about this projection. Does it also consider the fact that I think CalPERS is phasing out the 30-year plan?
Correct.
To move to a 20-year plan, that's what the district would be on?
Right, yes.
Lisa Corona, just a couple of quick comments. First of all, I just want to say I'm really pleased that there's ongoing project management with skilled, knowledgeable people on a daily basis running this, because that is a huge job during a construction process, so that's wonderful. You know, there are a lot of moving parts in this. There's a lot of numbers flying around. There's a lot of contracts being discussed. So I think it would behoove, be really beneficial for the public to have really just a simple outline of the actual costs from the beginning. And I think the beginning started with the seismic study, which hasn't been mentioned. But really what it took to put this whole project together in terms of those soft costs, as well as the multiple construction contracts that we're talking about, whether it's base bid, alternate bids, a hazmat, and other contracts that come through, so that the public has an accurate assessment of really the full cost, because just looking at the numbers on, when you added the 15% contingency, which my experience is that's almost always used in projects of anybody's, personal or in government as well. You know, just looking at those numbers, the 1.7 to the $2.6 million for the range of bidders without any additional alternatives, and then you add to that what is basically $340,000 of known soft costs between the consultants and the hazmat that we know we have to do for the 46,000. You know, it's really somewhere, you know, you're talking about like a range of $2 million to $3 million today without any add-ons, depending on what bid is taken. So I just think it's important to keep the numbers accurate as we move through. So at the end, there's an actual accounting, and people really know what they're looking at in terms of the contracts and the numbers. Thank you.
We have rough drafts of those documents, but they go first to the Finance Committee, and then once they approve, then they come before the board.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
It's starting to sound like Measure L all over again.
That's because that's not accurate, actually. We manage that we'll be able to finish this project in totality with the 1.7 fee, which was not the Measure L of 2.8.
I'm just saying. Anyway, out of curiosity on this, like, we're all talking about loans and stuff. Again, going back to sort of what was talked about before the campaign and like, or like for the elections, like, why not the fire board? Like, they have as much interest in this, and they are as much responsible for this town. And I kind of agree with the Contra Costa sheriff lady that was here last time, that in some ways you're almost like balkanizing the town. There's like two districts that look after two different towns. And in essence, it is all your tax money. All of the money we pay is then split between two boards, and now we've erected this artificial firewall. Part of it is in our head.
I have a request of Bill and Sylvia and Arlene and all of this. The total that we've been talking about is about 2.1 plus, if you consider all the alternatives and so on and so on. What I would be looking for Tuesday is a clear sheet that says source of funds and use of funds. And there may be some alternatives in there because there are clearly options and so on. But there needs to be a clear sheet that indicates source of funds and use of funds. If someone expects my vote on a yes on that one. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on the community center update? If not, thank you both, to both bills. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the tree replacement at the Gore lot. There is a one-page handout that did not get into the agenda for some reason, but we have copies here. We're talking about the lot at Coventry and Arlington, and there were 3 trees, or 5 trees actually, that were removed because of damage from disease and trees falling down. We met with Jack Griffith, a retired landscape architect, based on a suggestion of 3 live oak trees being put in that vacant lot. And we have a quote from Fernando Herrera, who is a landscape gardener and irrigation installer, and he met with Mr. Griffith at the site to review Mr. Griffith's plans, and he has a proposal to put in irrigation, which Jack Griffith believes is important for 3 years as these trees get established, and to also put a wire cage to keep them from all the deer that seem to be munching on everything. And that's for a total price of $5,250. So are there any public comments on this proposal?
I have a question about the costs. Is there going to be any way for some bad people to not steal our water?
That's a good question.
I hope so. I guess I'll let you solve that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll just have to check and make sure that on the tap. Yeah.
I guess somehow you lock it up, but people who have it in public place. But it occurred to me, we're spending a lot on water, and I hope we're not watering everybody's yards.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there's a cost missing. This is a bit tongue-in-cheek. Total consultant costs, 0. Thank you, a Kensington resident, Jack Griffith, for helping us out on this.
Right. All right. So I move that we accept.
Can I ask a question? Did we have, I'm surprised Director Mondavi didn't ask, did we have someone else bid for this job?
We did have someone who bid on just the planting of trees, and their bid was $1,800. And we could not find a bidder on the installation of the irrigation system. And there were several calls made, and the problem is it's too small of a job for most people. And so they were not willing to give us a bid on such a small job. That's okay. So I move that we accept this bid to install the irrigation system for 3 years and then plant the trees.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries 5-0. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, replacement of public garbage cans along Arlington and Calusa. There's a staff report, and I very much appreciate Lisa Corona's help. She's been terrific. In fact, she basically wrote this report, as well as did a lot of research on what cans, even took a trip over to San Francisco to see the cans that we're proposing in use over time, as well as over to San Rafael to see the cans that guide dogs have, which are similar, but we didn't choose those. You know, KIC had paid for 5 cans, 3 on Arlington, 2 on Calusa, and they've been extremely serviceable, but they are showing their signs of wear and tear. Anyway, we also, Lisa and I also went to Bayview to get Bayview's opinions on what they wanted. The side opening is really important because top openings allow birds to come in and rain. They also wanted side openings that were small, somewhat on the small side to prevent people from putting in their household garbage, which happens quite a bit. These cans would be replaced where they currently are with one exception, and that's on Calusa Avenue. We're going to take the one by the vacant lot and put it in front of the vet. That side of Calusa, the west side, gets a lot of foot traffic, much more so than the east side of Calusa. And the existing can that's in front of the chiropractor oftentimes is overflowing with garbage. So except for that placement, that's what we're proposing. And the quote is in here. Lisa also did a great job of researching. We have some cement garbage containers in the park. Some of them are missing tops. And she found that there are there's a company where we could replace the tops for about $500 in materials. And I suspect that the cost for Fernando to install them will be pretty trivial. So, are there any comments on the proposal?
I have just a question. So the trash receptacle by the chiropractic office would stay, and we would add one by the vet?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are these the public trash receptacles that KIC paid for? I'm assuming it's on county property and there's an easement for those?
Yes, there's.
Do we have the easement or does KIC?
County.
That's a
County.
Well, it's a county easement, but
been to
is it in
somebody,
your
though.
name? I mean, there'd be an easement permit. Is that in?
Right, that's what I meant, encroachment, right. Did we take those out, the encroachment permits?
I don't know if we took them out initially, or if KIC took them out initially. Okay.
Well, just we had the problem with the radar poles that Hart put in and didn't ask for an encroachment permit, so I think we, yeah.
We could work with Kate Roush and see. Yeah.
I'm sure it's no problem, but it's nice to, you know.
Yeah.
Delk, it's nice that the public trash containers in the shopping areas on Arlington and Calusa are going to be replaced with ones that are better designed, like the fixed top and the side door. These were ones that were proposed 18 months ago by the Solid Waste Committee at the time. However, I am concerned that there still will be no recycling containers at these locations, and that most recycling cans will be removed from the park. So much for the recycle part of the district's waste management mantra. I'm also concerned, Lisa, that the proposed replacement lids for the Park 7 concrete trash containers, the lids are for ones that are described as 18-inch in diameter. The 5 round containers in the park are actually about 26 3/4 of an inch in diameter. So the lids might not fit over the sides as they're supposed to, but will come right to the edge of the can, making it likely that they will easily be knocked or blown off. There is another model for an older concrete container, which those in the park certainly are. It's possible that they might work. The 2 other park trash cans are square, and a round lid certainly isn't the best choice. In closing, please reconsider and also buy recycling cans for Arlington and Calusa. Even if people put non-recyclable items in them, they put recyclable items in them, and that has to be combined with garbage. At least there will be twice as many containers, and the overflow on weekends will be less likely. Thank you.
With respect to the park containers, Delk, we kept 2 round concrete containers, and so we have those to put back into the park if we want. They were at locations that Bayview said have minimal use, so we do have those. With respect to the recycling, contaminating recyclables with non-recyclables renders the whole lot as solid waste. Bayview is concerned that there's not enough recycling material from the farmer's market. Most of it is compostable. When we talked to El Cerrito Recycling Center, El Cerrito is getting rid of some of their recycling containers in certain areas because they get so contaminated with non-recyclable material, rendering the whole lot non-usable. And there was a piece on NPR yesterday talking about China is totally rejecting our plastics. They are not accepting them. Other Asian companies are not accepting them. So I think that the idea of recycling is a very good idea, but in practice, it doesn't work very well. I've gone around when I'm walking dogs, and I see a lot of people throwing in inappropriate things into their recycling container. So I think, unfortunately, it's just not something that we want to take on right now.
All right, great. Then let's change from reduce, reuse, recycle to take it all to the dump. All right? You cannot say that you support recycling and not have cans on public streets that allow people to recycle. We can do a little bit of educational activity. But anyway, here's the information, I think, that has the correct lid that you want to try.
I'd like to just say another option if you are running into problems with a lid is to maybe use there used to be tap plastics down on San Pablo, and you sometimes can have something custom made and potentially not terribly expensive. It might be worth looking into if that's necessary.
Actually, just as like, so I remember, I think around Berkeley maybe, some of their trash cans also have like a micro recycle container also in it. I think I've seen some of those. Like, you know, there's a trash. Yeah, the top is a small micro recycle thing for bottles or cans, and then the bottom is just a standard trash can. So in a sense, it would be a good compromise between the two options.
Well, I want to extend my thanks to both Lisa Corona and you, President Natoli, who I know you two have worked, 18 months maybe on this issue. So I thank you very much. And you've logged many miles and many meetings in this. And I really have to thank you for a valid quote, because I spent many years on the board where we found we didn't have valid quotes, and I was so excited that this one was still held. So with that, although I would also like to talk to Dr. Delk perhaps after the meeting, because I think I have some Boy Scouts who could really work on some issues with you about recycling and solid waste education, and perhaps some ideas for projects, so that we could, well, yeah, not tonight, but we'll in the future have contact. So I would like to make a motion that we authorize this $9,262.23 quoted for the purchase of public trash receptacles in commercial areas. Do we need to add the? Anyway, that's my motion.
No. Okay. All right. Wait, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 But I would still like to say that if we look around where possible, see if we can somehow introduce at least micro recycling, because I kind of agree with Dr. Delk on that.
Mm-hmm. Let me just,
Well,
Lisa?
the second
Yeah.
purchase is within the purview of the general manager.
Yeah, so we can,
So I would suggest that we have a consensus that the general manager be able to purchase the correct lids for Kensington Park, if that's all right, rather than making a motion.
I'll second if we need to second.
I agree with that.
okay. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, thank you. We now have the Nikolai Actuarial Report update and possible approval of additional work. I'll turn that over to Mr. Constantouris.
Thank you, President Natoli. We have authorized Nikolai to go ahead and with the actuarial report for 2018-19, which is required by CalPERS. This is for OPEB. And they have also given us a quote of $2,800 for 2019-20, which is a very reasonable number. The Finance Committee reviewed this on February 12th and recommended approval. It's beyond the General Manager's authority, So we're recommending that the board authorize the work for 2019-20 for $2,800.
This is work that is needed, and so I will move that we accept the Nikolai bid. Oh.
Public comment?
Oh, are there any?
Well, I'll second the motion, and then you can have public comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
More in the nature of an inquiry. Linda Lipscomb. I thought that the general manager's authority was $5,000, and if this item is $2,800,
He already used his wad of cash on the first report.
Technically,
each item.
Well, yeah, technically, they gave us an estimate of $7,800, and we broke it in two at the finance meeting so that we could execute the beginning so that we weren't behind for the June audit.
A bit of sharp practice, but
Yeah,
okay.
it was, but
Yeah. Okay. So we have a motion that was seconded to accept this proposal. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, the next item is minutes for discussion and possible action.
Could I, just because I was mentioned that the minutes are part of the policy manual coming up, does it make sense to wait for that, to the board have this discussion?
that's what I believe would be most prudent, given that there are no documents provided, if I'm not mistaken. There are no documents here for discussion.
Well,
we should have minutes of
a staff report, or
a staff report,
yeah.
So that we can discuss the, generalized discussion, but as they're going to.
Yes, I guess, because this can also help drive the staff report. Also, it's probably a good idea, so if we don't need to keep rereading the policy and procedure manual, because every time we edit it, you need to, bring it up and it resets. That's how my understanding of these things go. The reason I brought this up, and it's sort of unfortunate, it always comes at the penultimate hour, is that the current practice as is, I do not think is sustainable at all. And it also is very concerning to me because I've actually been using just as an example, and I've also heard from other people, I've been using the minutes as a way to essentially go back very far in time and quickly understand everything that's been going on, and also history around different sets of events. And also, according to our retention policy, as I've stated before, the minutes are essentially the one item in which we keep in perpetuity. Everyone can say, watch the video or watch the audio, but our policy does not have us retaining those ad infinitum. And also, they're technically very cumbersome for people if you want to skim, 3 or 4 years of history in a few weeks. You literally probably have to watch multiple days. And also, the other reason is that, this practice where board members themselves, for, the primary meeting of all 5 of us, are somehow being involved in the processing of the minutes is also become somewhat disconcerting, because in history, that's how people start to control the narrative to their personal preference, whereas the minutes are supposed to be how we are held accountable in time. The last item about this that actually was really bothering me is that some of the logic around why we've changed to this method doesn't seem to add up, and I can't, for the life of me, I've gone back and read through the minutes that went up to the change after the April 12th meeting, and I don't see how we suddenly went from one form to the other without any board discussion or decision-making. And so the reason I bring this up is I don't want to end up in a situation where we somehow, just by virtue of this is what we were doing now, is what we're going to be doing once the policy and procedure manual comes out, or the policy and procedure manual has something and then the board's like, yeah, we're just going to ram this through 4-1. So that's why I actually brought up this conversation topic. And actually, I had asked the district administrator to come and just comment on the minutes a bit, just because, I'm learning that they also serve some staff functions, and I'm also, afterwards, I'm happy to bring up, where did I put it? So many things today. Here we go. I also had gone through some of the previous minutes, and it was fairly clear to me that a large part of the community liked the old minutes. I know some people didn't, that's also reflected in the previous minutes, but I believe we got to these somewhat, detailed minutes not by chance. That there had to be some add up or some events that led to these original set of minutes. And, yes?
Okay. To answer a couple of your questions or to discuss a couple of things, why we changed, that's under the purview of the general manager. We actually had a discussion excuse me, let me get my quotes.
February 23, 2017?
In July of 2017, where the general manager brought up the different types of minutes and suggested changes. And then the processing question about controlling the narrative, I think that isn't really a valid conjecture, because the fact is that minutes, no matter how they come before the board, and the board and the community have, if not one, multiple attempts to make amendments to the minutes and correct them. So the idea that a government agency controls the minutes, well, that would be that
Well, I mean the entities that are voted on.
Please don't interrupt.
That would suggest that we produce the minutes and then they're not open for discussion. They're always open for discussion and clarification, and also comparison to the actual videotape. So people can go back and forth, and they have done so, to clarify the minutes. So that process. We do think, we should look at how we take minutes and what the board wants them to be and what their function, and that's part of the policy and procedures manual. And I don't think you can say, well, something is passed 4-1, and yet implying that a minority is being abused, and then yet say, but only a minority objects to the minutes the way they were, so therefore they shouldn't be listened to.
I'm saying like it was essentially, from reading the old transcripts, it almost came out to about 50-50, at least of people with very strong opinions. So it was borderline. In the end, I believe even Director Welsh had said, he appreciated the effort, but, people seem to like their minutes, and so it was not really something that we would suddenly start messing around with. And it's just kind of odd, because I actually had made some inquiries to CSDA about how we were doing our minutes, and their answer was not really reassuring. I'll happily read the letter into the record, and everyone keeps misspelling my name. It's just frustrating. Dear Mr. Mondavi, thank you for the email and your questions. Based on the information you have provided and taking it at face value, I'm not sure that anything illegal is being done. And I did not imply anything illegal was being done, just for the record. I said I had some concerns that I was new to government, and these were just a set of events that were happening. So that was his. I did not say anything like that. That said, I think it is safe to at least say that some best practices could be implemented to create a more transparent environment overall and better delineate board and staff roles. I recommend that you should initially direct concerns to the district's general counsel, specifically as to officials following adopted policies, e.g. who is transcribing minutes, process for payment of district services. So long as the minutes accurately depict what transpires during the meeting and board actions, there are no specific guidelines for how board minutes are prepared. If current practice is not following district policy, that should be brought up and discussed by the full board and with the general manager to remedy. In regards to access to source material, it seems that all items being referenced are subject to being public records, regardless if they are on-site or off-site, and should be made available to you and others upon request. You are permitted to use the Public Records Act to request any district record, although a simple request to staff should typically allow you to receive any relevant documents if they have been preserved by the district. I hope this helps some. And I did say thank you to him.
Might I ask you to read the letter you sent to them?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Sure. Dear Mr. McCormack, my name is Cyrus Modavi. I am a newly elected board member of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Service District, KPPCSD, in the Bay Area. As a new director, I am seeking CSD's and your advice on proper governance process, law, and ethics regarding summary minutes. I ask because having only taken my seat a month ago, this was sent in February, I have started to notice several irregularities that do not agree with my intuition of how government should function. I wish to confirm whether it is compliant, albeit unusual behavior, or raises a more serious flag. For the last few months, our minutes have been contracted out to a transcription service. Beyond directly contradicting our policy and procedure manual that delineates staff as the official recorder of the minutes, there are a few other details that seem particular to me. One, the transcription service is being paid for through the use of either the board president's or another board member's personal credit card, with reimbursement by the district. Two, the products generated by the service are first shipped to a personal address, or, well, I actually should have said also, or email, but, okay, I'm sorry, I forgot that, i.e. the board member's house. But, you know, actually I did see the PRA requests that someone had made regarding the reimbursements, and like, for example, your address was a shipping address instead of the public safety building, which was kind of unusual for a public document.
They emailed me the documents, just so you know. They didn't send them over the mail.
Okay, but like still. Anyway.
I think it's important. You're implying that they sent it to my address. They did not send it to my address. They emailed me to my district email address.
Okay, well.
Thank you.
Yes. Anyway, according to the service's website, they only provide verbatim transcription services. Yet posted minutes ostensibly from this service are summarized in ways that highlight understanding of district business and occasionally utilize first-person language, such as referencing to the board in terms of I, we, and our. Inquiries with district staff have left me unable to obtain any original source material from this service, because original source material covering meetings back to May 2018 is not kept at the district offices. These 4 details are troubling to me, but I wish to be sure they are actually an issue before taking any action or further investigating. If I should pursue this further, what would you recommend that I do? Given the sensitive nature of this inquiry, I would kindly ask that any discretion that can be granted. I look forward to and I'm grateful for any advice on this matter. And so the reason this is bothering me is because actually one of the other citizens, you might know Kathy Stein, had made a PRA request for the original transcription services. And oddly enough, she complained to me saying that for some reason the general counsel told her to go listen to the audio recordings. I have the email.
Well, you have Kathy Stein's email, but that our general counsel is.
I made those available to Ms. Stein.
After she pressed it, because I remember she had complained to me saying that she needed to then email you again, ask where offsite was, and saying she wanted the actual original writing rather than a link to read the audios.
Once I understood that, I obtained them, and they were sent to her. They are now located at the district office.
Okay, but yet before that, they were not.
Well, that's one of the beauties of the Public Records Act, is it does enable.
But I could not get access to them. I asked the district administrator. She said she did not have them, and
Well, the actual original document is the recording of the meeting.
I looked at the original documents. There's like words missing in places where there's
No.
time.
The original document is there. It's in a tape. It's that. And then, but the problem that you're setting up, unfortunately, is a false one. The fact is, you have the original recording to compare against the minutes. If you don't like the tense, well, that's disliking Jane Eyre and preferring Agnes Grey. But the fact is, you have the original document, you have the minutes produced, and you have opportunity to debate and argue what has been written. Now, I think that we're all going to be united in the fact that we want more clarity. We want to be able to give this direction, and we want to have the best possible minutes in terms of cost, in terms of utilizing staff and board time well, in terms of producing a record that serves through posterity. All those things are really important, and we're united in that. And I think the only disagreement we have is about which tool should we use to create that, and we believe it should be the policy and procedure manual, because our policy and procedure manual as it exists is pretty spotty. There is some debate, or a whole lot of debate, about whether it was actually ever approved by the board. And the policy and procedure manual that we currently have is summary minutes. It's not verbatim minutes, which we were often producing. So we have some things to clarify.
I'm going to move that we postpone the.
Actually, I have one quick
I'm
comment.
moving-
It's
I'm
very
moving-
important, this
I'm
comment.
moving
May I please
until-
speak?
I'm moving.
It's
that
important,
we-
please.
I'm moving that we postpone further discussion of this until we have the policy and procedure manual up for discussion.
Vita Dora, it seems like now if we want to find out anything that's going on, we have to submit a PRA. So short of that, obviously these things were done overseas. I also saw copies of the PRA and the bills that were sent directly to a district director's house for producing these.
To his email address,
They were sent to the district's email address. Okay? Nothing was ever sent to my house.
And we can access
Nothing,
that at
nothing,
I saw
nothing.
the bill for the production of this. There were two bills to two different directors' homes. And
The
one
bill
was
did
for
not go to my home.
203, 200 and something, and the other one was for.
But it was
300
my,
something.
it was my personal credit card, absolutely. Well, I think I used PayPal.
Well,
But
whatever you did, it was your personal account.
It was, yes.
So was the other. You were both reimbursed
Okay,
by the district. Excuse me, I've got the floor and I've got 5 minutes. But what I wanted to also say, this set of minutes is an insult to this community. The grammar, and as I said, it's obvious it was done overseas by somebody who didn't speak very good English. But in the minutes, and they're not, the pages are not numbered, so it's very difficult to find things. The president, said that the park is an asset, but the bond to buy the park, excuse me, I forgot my glasses, and administration, the park is an asset, but the bond to buy the park did not include money for maintenance. That's not correct. On your tax bill, you'll see one item that said it's an LLD, I think it's J2, it's the Lighting and Landscape District. And I believe each parcel this year was paying $17.24 for the maintenance of the park. And I believe in your budget, it shows that you did receive $38,000. Now, I grant you, it's not enough money, and perhaps we should, try to figure out how to increase it. But there was maintenance put into when we purchased the park.
Yeah. I'm concerned about the time because it's 9:45, and I'm just going to postpone, I've moved to postpone the minutes until we review the policy and procedure manual in draft.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, so 4-0.
4-1.
41, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Well, then I hope my comment will be considered a comment about something which has been put over on the agenda.
She's got to do a motion to extend the meeting. Linda, is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so I'll move to extend the meeting until 10:15.
I'll second.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So 5-0, okay. Go ahead.
Linda Lipscomb here. I just have to add, these minutes are a disgrace. At least 83% in my checking on the census of our community has a bachelor's degree or higher. And this is an illiterate transcript of someone who didn't understand what we do, how we do it, and idiomatic expressions, and someone who doesn't know syntax, grammar, tenses. It's unbelievable. The minutes that we had were made pursuant to the policy manual, which says they shall be prepared by staff. And it's someone that knows what we're doing here. And people loved the minutes. I mean, they really loved them. If they couldn't go to the meeting and they wouldn't have to wade through a couple of hours of either tape or video, they could look at the minutes. And the minutes also become, they're very important. In a later litigation, minutes become the official record of what happened. I would be absolutely just disgraced to have to show this or anything similar. And we have perfectly capable staff that has done a fine job in the past. I can't believe that this would be considered as a substitute for this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? All right, moving on to item D, California Prop 68 grant report for discussion and possible action.
Oh, hi. Well, I was hoping the administrator would do this because she went with me. She actually found the grant and had brought it to my attention. And I had asked Tony to tag along and try to be useful to her in this process. Would you like to present part of this, or shall I? Okay. I just didn't want to steal anyone's thunder because this wasn't necessarily because of me. So, background. So we had gone to, the director had made aware of this grant and that there was a workshop coming up. Do I have to read it verbatim, or how does that work? Okay, I don't know. It's like, I don't give reports like this. So anyway, the Prop 68 is essentially this big was a measure, or proposition actually, that essentially, put a lot of money aside for doing park and wildlife stuff. The total amount of the money available in the grant is $650 million about, and of this, for the coming 2019 round, there is about $255-ish million available. In future rounds, another $395 million will be available, so there's multiple rounds of this ongoing. And so the maximum amount you can request is $8.5 million, and the minimum, if for some reason you only need $200,000, you can ask for $200,000. So anyway, the grant itself has really only two requirements for qualifying. And
Can I ask you to just lower your voice?
oh, sorry. Yeah. Some people say it's good to have a voice that projects.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so the grant is split into basically two different ways that you can qualify. Either you have a per capita income that is under $51,000, not Kensington at all, or you have a ratio of less than 3 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents within the area that the official government website gives you. We actually qualify for that under certain different scenarios of requesting a grant. More interestingly, though, they do not actually have any of our parkland listed in the government databases. Neither Kensington Park nor the Gore Lot had been actually registered, as park area, at least in the state servers. So we're in the process of letting them know that so that they can do that, because that's actually part of how you qualify for the grant, is you sort of start from areas that are considered parks. And so really, because of how the Kensington Park itself is located, right near East Bay Regional Parks, it itself, if you were to try to set up a project there, would not qualify in either categories. Again, we're actually quite an affluent community. But if you were to start from the Gore lot, we actually do qualify for like the funding based on that rubric. The issue is that we're still trying to figure out if, depending on how the project is structured, if we can use the pin at the Gore lot, like the qualification pin, to fund projects elsewhere, or if they consider our two parks separate entities completely. This town is kind of unique in how our quote-unquote parkland is spread throughout town. The district will also need to ascertain whether acquiring the paths and improving them might facilitate work in Kensington Park. And so actually, this brought up when we had been talking to the people about how we could qualify based on that we were near East Bay Regional Parks, and they actually suggested, and we're still trying to get some like written confirmation whether or not that is true, that if you were to use expanding the parks as part of a project, like say expanding the paths as part of the project for like the Kensington Park, we could then actually qualify for work in the main park, and that could include like money for this building. You sign a contract and they consider it needs met, and they will not retroactively fund things. So apparently we knew about this grant, or in some shape or form, like last year at least, and it's kind of disappointing, but oh well. But still, both me and Director Wolter did agree that Kensington should try to qualify, or should try to apply for grant money, because there might be other works that do qualify, like renovating the landscape in front and around of the community center, including the amphitheater, renovating the tot lot, resurfacing the tennis courts, landscaping parts of the park not yet addressed. And so we're supposed to take public comment, consider, discuss, and provide direction to staff as needed.
My question is, when I've looked at Prop 68, I see that it's administered by California Fish and Wildlife, and it is with priorities in 3 major areas: watershed restoration, watersheds, and delta water quality and ecosystem restoration. So I'm not sure how we could even...
This is a parse out, like, from Prop 68 in some ways. They actually, some affluent communities have qualified for park work under this, and like the entire workshop was about getting money for parks. So this particular part of the grant that we had gone to was park money type grants. And so I believe even San Francisco has successfully gotten money. Remember, place where over 100K is considered poverty line. It's kind of depressing, but.
Can you talk a little bit about how those affluent communities qualified and how?
So they qualified under the ratio of less than 3 acres per 1,000 residents. So they had an area of park, or they were trying to extend the park such that when they set down this qualification pin, which is really how the government in the state, it's how they determine your eligibility. Essentially, on this website, you drop a pin somewhere, it draws a half-mile radius, pulls census data, and then essentially does these calculations. They qualified because essentially they had been doing a project whereby the part of their town they had been working on essentially met the ratio of less than 3 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. And so that's something like the Gore lot, or in extending the Kensington Park by having path additions, is essentially would make us still qualify.
Well, if the thought is that the Gore lot is going to be considered a park, I'm not sure that that would really qualify. It's a tiny little parcel that's not used as a park.
Well, again, their definition of park is actually quite broad when you look at the manual. A park, I believe, was essentially some open land that had one recreational feature, and a recreational feature was various things that, interestingly enough, included public art or walking area. I don't have the exact grant on me at the moment, but the point was we did ask them, and they're like saying, yeah, you guys could technically qualify under these conditions.
I have, just for clarification, because it says here 2 additional basic requirements. So it's not 2 additional basic requirements for qualifying?
Oh, it should be or, excuse me. This was actually a major question
additional, okay.
at the, well, it was actually a major question at the workshop because there was a lot of confusion. I think we spent I think the back and forth was like maybe 15 or 20 minutes of them trying to answer this question so people understood. It's, you either have to be not greater than 51K, or you have to have a ratio less than 3 acres parkland per 1,000 residents. So it's not an and statement.
Okay, it's an or both. And who wrote the staff report? It doesn't say. There's no name
Well,
listed on
me and Director Volter wrote it.
District Administrator Wolter?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's getting near the end of the night and I'm getting a bit
Okay.
dehydrated. Oh yeah, go for it.
So, okay, so it's you, Cyrus, we should have you listed on that. Okay. But you're not staff, so I guess we don't want to call it a staff report.
Technically, she is staff, just for the record.
For the record, I wrote the staff report. I sent it to Director Madavi so that he could make additions or any corrections he thought were appropriate. He did so. I submitted the staff report to the general manager. He asked that the format be changed so that my name did not appear on it. He wants all the staff reports to be the same, and so it now appears in the format that it does. I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
It does. Then I'm going to ask the question of the general manager. Then the last staff report has a submitted by. Is that the format that we're going to adopt as the?
Yeah, yes, that should have included that line, but
Okay,
I did review this, I did see it, and asked that it be put on the agenda.
So I was aware of Prop 68 at some point last year, maybe after it passed, and did some research on it and did subsequent research because I was part of a discussion about, this item. And so Prop 68 is huge. It's run by under at least 2 agencies, Department of Resources and the Department of Parks, which I may be under Department of Resources. I spoke to a woman named Christelle Taillon, who had worked in the Department of Parks for 15 years about the project based on what District Administrator Walter had told me about it, trying to ask some of the questions that you're posing. Would it count if we're here or there, and what we would use it for? She was not terribly encouraging, sent me to somebody over at the Parks Department. I highly recommend you speaking, not just emailing, but actually talking to, they have a list of technical assistance contacts. I spoke to Noelle Breitenbach and said she might be getting additional calls about this. We discussed, have you looked at this full application guideline?
That was a requirement to actually go through the workshop. So yes,
Yeah.
I've read it and gone through thinking about how Kensington would apply for the point system. We are technically, the one area where we are probably a bit dinged is on the poverty one, but, because, this is this community, ironically enough. But a lot of the other ones, the 2 statewide ones, like the ranking is completely dependent on who applies that round. Like some rounds we might do better than other rounds, but then the other 50% of points is literally everything we do ourselves. And that includes things like community outreach and planning, which is what this town is good at.
Would we need to first register with the California Park System? Is that the first step that you would suggest?
That's what we are doing right now to get the parks sort of annotated.
Okay.
Yeah.
May I add something here? The California grant folks actually reached out to me. I received a couple of emails. I followed up, and the woman with whom I spoke, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name offhand, was very encouraging. She encouraged us to attend this workshop. I don't think they would have done that if they didn't think that there was some possibility that we might qualify.
Do you know how they reached out, like why if they didn't have our parks registered, how they knew to reach out to you?
I think because of the WW information. I think we were probably on somebody's database. In fact, she mentioned that. She referenced that in the phone conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
I spoke also to them about the possibility related to paths. Obviously, legal ownership is an issue. And there's also a lot of requirements for multi-use for example, of trails, not just one use. I mentioned the issue around evacuation. They said maybe look at Caltrans. There's other programs under Caltrans for trails, so I wanted to mention that. There's issues around water runoff. There's a lot of complicated issues. I'm sure you know if you've read this, it's quite complex. But yeah, I just recommend that you talk to some of the folks I did. I also got a 28-page Excel sheet of all kinds of funding opportunities. So I've done some research as well. I feel like, obviously, would love to see more funding for the park. I think there's a concern over our true competitiveness for this. The two people I spoke to were not as encouraging, but, you know, I guess it's a matter of opinion. I think that as far as what to do next, I mean, I think, you know, director's time doesn't cost anything, so I think it's worth continuing to research.
Actually, director's time does cost something because A, like I work, and B, your tax money pays for me to go to lab to do my work. So just because I volunteer here does not mean my time is free. I volunteer it willingly.
Well, I'm in the same boat, so I guess I should have said that there's no dollar cost to the district per se for some of these activities. That's very big. But I think just be very aware of what is involved in this. This is really a general manager's decision about how to use staff time for pursuing opportunities. And
he authorized.
I know. I'm just saying.
And I asked to tag along, and so I suggest then you take this to the general manager.
Right. So I just think there's lots of information here, and I'm not sure if there's a decision point here, which I'm supposed to discuss. So I tried to be helpful by doing additional research, and I just have more resources for you.
And Director Madavi, if you could just follow up with some of the people and just see how viable some of these projects are, I think that would be great. If you could do a little bit more research, if you don't mind, because I think this idea, if we can get some money for improving the park, obviously that would be terrific.
They were very insistent that the point be placed at the area where you're going to be doing the work.
Well, actually, they said if you're expanding the area, like say acquisition, then you can put the point there. And so if you consider that as part of an extension of the park to allow people to get to the park, then those become points that you can put it on. They're actually in their manual, they show examples of that.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, I had a wonderful conversation with some other CSDs. Previously, those that have parks and recreation programs, they can really focus you on grants because they often go after them. And they're very willing to help and to talk about the process for them. And since they have a robust program, it's easier to kind of follow in their footsteps.
Actually, on that note, you bring up a good, I'll let you talk first.
The hour is late, I know, and I very much we appreciate that you extended the meeting. I am seeing that there is another item on the, I'm seeing that there's another item on the agenda in terms of discussing correspondence.
But we're not there yet.
I think I have enough information to move on this for now, so we can move on to the next item.
I just wanted to mention one other thing, which was I did mention the idea of how the paths could help people get to Tilden, and that seemed to spark some interest. And again, I would encourage you to look at Caltrans for other options.
So I thought that I might be addressing that item, that item.
Board president needs to.
Yes, yeah.
So thank you, Director Madavi. All right, the next item is correspondence for discussion and possible action.
Can I also just, is this going to be taken up with the policy and procedures manual?
Yes, it will. It should also be as part of the policy and procedures manual. And
right, doesn't it make sense?
And there's
to wait until
nothing
that?
within here. Okay.
So I think for those of us who attended the matrix reports, and we very much appreciated those of you who were able to come.
I'd like to just say that those meetings were designed for citizens. They were not put around board members' schedules. There's a lot of attention being paid as to which board members attended and didn't attend, and they really were designed for the public.
What I think is important, Sylvia, is that there were well over 100 people who came. This room was packed both days. and there was a sense.
Sorry, which item are we talking about now?
Well, actually, there is correspondence in here, in the package, from Pat Gillette, who I understand is on the East Coast.
That's not that item. I'm just letting you know that the correspondence, and I had a confusion about that also, the correspondence was something that Director Mahdavi brought up to discuss how we handle correspondence in general. I'm assuming, right? Yes. That's what this item's about.
Shall I wait until the end then? I was lined up and there to speak earlier, Eileen, on things that were not on the agenda, and we were told that they would appear at the end.
Right.
So that's why I'm here.
Okay. I think I'm going to move that we postpone the correspondence until we review the policy and procedure manual.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. And then the last item on the agenda is authorization for board attendance at the CSDA Annual Conference in Anaheim in September. Yeah. Mr. Kotouris, can you address that?
Thank you, Madam President. The conference is in September, from September 25 to September 28th. And traditionally, the KPPCSD, has encouraged attendance from the board members, and some staff have also attended in prior years. So this is just authorization for the board to attend, and there's some dates here. It's at the Anaheim Marriott, and the registration fees prior to August 23rd are $625. So we're recommending that the board approve attendance at the conference and reimbursement of costs related to attendance.
And the funds are in the budget.
Correct.
Yeah.
I move to authorize board attendance at this CSDA
Wait, one thing. This was for anyone who could attend, right? So in theory, you could have more than 2 people going, right?
Correct, yes.
All board members and the general manager have traditionally been able to attend.
I'm just going to highlight something that I caught my eye in the government code, section 53232.2. When reimbursement is otherwise authorized by statute, a local agency may reimburse members of a legislative body for actual and necessary expenses incurred in the performance of official duties. How is it necessary that if anyone wants to go, they can go? Given that we all talk about how we have limited funds and we're trying to economize, sometimes in the wrong places.
I can say that this has been an extremely valuable conference every year. I come back with something very valuable for the district. I've done district financing. I can share notes from previous attendance that I've taken, so I think it's very valuable, and I encourage you especially to attend as a new board member. You'll find it illuminating, enlightening, educational, and you will meet other directors from other districts that face problems like us.
Like, of course, because traditionally, I believe only 1 or 2 board members went, and then they came back and taught the rest of the board. Why is it more board members need to go? Like, for example, last year, all 4 board members went.
If you would like to vote against the resolution, please do so. I think I would like to motion that we...
Board members did not go.
Excuse me, was it 2017? I don't remember which one.
But the district lacks
Palm Springs or Indian Wells one.
We lack an onboarding procedure. We also lack staff that would have suitable time to implement an onboarding procedure. I will say that my times at the conferences, and I was recommended when I joined the board actually by the fire district, that they said it was incredibly valuable. And it was. I've absolutely learned things that have saved the district money through workshops, as well as being able for having board members to clear and make sure that they're current on their current educational components.
Yes, I guess it's valuable. I'm saying, does nobody not register that you don't need to send 4 or 3 or sometimes even 2, like you can send 1 board member, they absorb a lot, they bring back all their notes, they share their slides and knowledge, and this is actually a place where you don't necessary to send everyone.
They have concurrent sessions, and so it usually, what happens is people are going to different sessions at the same time.
We would work together to make sure that we were covering as many sessions pertaining as we could. in order to bring back the most information for the board.
We're reaching the end of our time limit for the meeting, so I would like to move that we approve a resolution to authorize board members to attend the CSDA conference in September.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Public
Aye.
comment?
Aye.
Idea's good, writing as it is, no.
I'm sorry.
Is there any public comment?
Nay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to get the exposure. Now, if I may, please.
Oh, just,
I wanted to clarify the motion. There is not a resolution. We're just approving attendance and reimbursement.
This has to be done in public session and authorized for anyone to attend and to authorize and reimbursement of those expenses.
for board members and the general manager, I mean, if it's, but
I
that's,
think we've made a motion, or we've authorized at a vote of 4 of 1. I don't know how that works if it's not a resolution.
If I may suggest that you extend the meeting and then allow public comment and then call the question?
Well, we called the question, but additional comments on this, on the approval?
First, you need to extend the meeting.
All right. I'll extend the meeting until 10:30. Can I have a vote on that? All those in favor?
I'll
Aye.
second that motion.
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
And now we're going to public comment.
okay. Johanna? Thank you.
Wait, excuse me, public comment on the attendance?
On the attendance, are there any public comments on the CSDA conference? Okay, yes.
Hi, Linda Lipscomb. Do you know what the total cost is going to be? Does it include hotel? Does it include air flight?
The air flights, the hotel rooms are $180 per night.
Yeah.
The registration is $625 if you do it on an early bird basis, and it would be a flight to Los Angeles.
Per person, $625, and then air flight, and then 1 day overnight, 2 days? 4 days.
2 or 3 days.
So do you know what the total amount is? It just seems more than,
It's been general practice, so no, I don't have the number. I still believe we should go forward. I think it is the one thing that has proven to be the most valuable thing to be as a board member, education-wise. And I get my certificates for ethics, for sexual harassment training at one time, and I have learned more at every CSDA conference than I learned all year. It's a year's worth of learning in 3 or 4 days.
not, that, I'm not saying that you.
It is
didn't.
budgeted.
It's budgeted. Then you do know what.
It's a
the
budget
number
item,
is.
yes.
So you do know what the number is.
I know what the number is in the budget. Do you have any more comments?
I'm waiting.
I don't know if it's going to be in.
I mean, is it 10,000? Is it,
Okay, well,
I mean, for Matrix to go out with the RFP is like, what, 16, 17,000?
12,
12,000. Thank you.
also already budgeted.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was the Matrix number.
I don't think that I would have waited all evening if there hadn't been the kind of participation that there was. I mean, as I said, there were well over 100 people there. I am not here to be contentious or castigate board for not being there. I do think it would have been useful for each of you to have really seen the palpable sense of interest and urgency that we have spent nearly 3 hours tonight without a discussion. And in your report, Tony, you have said it is planned to place the report on a board agenda later in March or in April for discussion. And it's very difficult to have a discussion here, as we know. and possible direction from the Board of Directors. This will likely result in selecting a path forward for the Kensington Police Department. I think that there are quite a number of us who would feel it respectful to have a forum, and Eileen, you had mentioned the idea of a kind of town hall or some forum for a discussion, so that there could be really a deeper conversation in that report. And by the way, I mean, Jim Watt and others came up. I mean, there are tremendous cost escalations. The idea of doing this has a lot of financial implications. There are sound management implications about doing this. I think all of us would feel a sense of relief, and I think it would really help to open things up and have that conversation. So that's my question, really. I waited to ask, what is your intent? What is your intent? In terms of having that kind of a forum. I'm not asking about a decision.
Well, we did have 4 community meetings on Matrix. Our intent from the staff perspective is to present some options for discussion, and then the board can provide either direction or consider them or have different options. The public is welcome to come and participate.
And those would be at special meetings, Tony, because I don't think that this forum is conducive to the kind of conversation that many of us would like to have, and that frankly this community deserves to have, that we want from our board and from the governance structure.
Our intent is to put them on a regular meeting. If the board directs us to have an additional meeting or special meeting, that is the board's discretion.
Eileen, I wonder if you would address this from the board's perspective.
Well, I think that this is just public comment, isn't it?
Yes, it's not
It's not a discussion item.
Because this hasn't been agendized, I can't talk about it, but I just do have a question. Could we even have a town hall meeting with respect to how that would be agendized, to have a town hall meeting?
You could certainly agendize discussion of options for the police services or something like that. You couldn't take an action.
Okay.
But you could have that discussion. I think the question that's
what those
being-
community meetings were.
Yeah, I think that the question that the speaker is getting to is, you know, in the normal meeting, there's a staff report, there's questions and comments from the board. People who want to speak to it come up to the podium, make their comments to the board. If the board so desires, they can ask follow-up questions of staff, then the next speaker comes up, and so on. I think that the speaker is asking for a more interactive process.
It is both a more interactive process and an informational kind of input that really is not reflected at this point. That was a very robust set of meetings with questions raised and answers given that this board should be taking under advisement. And I want to make sure, I think all of us want to make sure, that that is really part of the public discussion with you, that we're in partnership with you doing this.
Well, thank you. I think we appreciate your input.
I hope so.
We'll have to discuss that further because it's not agendized, but it's food for thought.
Let's see if I can get my 5 minutes. John Gaccioni. Look at the members of this board. The majority have been elected by Kensington voters to fix our police department. The Kensington voters have spoken. Some community members are still having a difficult time accepting this fact. They keep suggesting that we need to have another vote. Most likely, they will keep asking until they get the results they want. But you have to ask yourself, just what are they afraid of? I don't know. they may have to wait till the next election. As an additional note, since hearsay says that the Kensington police have solved all of El Cerrito's burglary cases, then they shouldn't be so reluctant to enter into a contract with El Cerrito since they work together so well. Thank you very much.
Take 5 minutes, I'm tired too. You know, I know this is a frustrating process for all of us, but the fact that we don't have a police chief came up again and again and again in both meetings, which I went to both meetings, the Thursday evening meeting and the Saturday meeting. And so, I mean, I'm at a loss as to how to get that on the agenda. I've followed the procedure I was told to pursue, and I would just like to publicly state that needs to be an item of top priority, and that we can't let this go for another 3 months and then up our interim contract. That's just an absolute necessity for this community, and I think almost all our police issues stem from that problem. So I'd like to formally request that that be on the next agenda. Thank you.
Well, that decision is under the purview of the general manager, and when I joined the board, we thought we had a permanent police chief, and it turned out we then ran through 3 in quick succession. So we have an interim police chief who has served for almost 2.5 years. So that to say that we do not have a police chief is incorrect and erroneous and unfair to the service he has provided, whether or not you like his service or not on a personal level.
No, it's not the fact that he has served for 2.5 years. It's the fact that the police department is not in a stable state as long as you have an interim chief and you don't know whether you're going to contract out or not. And it creates a huge amount of tension in the community and for the police themselves. And it's just not a good situation.
No, we absolutely wish that it had been different. I absolutely wish that we could have had a police chief that I could have voted and felt was upstanding and ethical in 2015, but I didn't feel that I could vote that way.
Well, it's a shame that Officer Wilkins feels she has to leave because she could have been promoted from the ranks and as an acting chief while we found a chief. And I really want to suggest you have many interested people who came to those meetings. Form a committee, let us help. Don't keep us out.
One last comment, and then, okay, yeah.
Andrew Gutierrez. I've been coming to these meetings for roughly 25 years. Mostly, they've been acrimonious. They haven't really addressed the issues, and we continue along that vein. It's just the actors are on the other side. The campaign for the election 2020 has begun. And it's an election about controlling KPCSD. Some of the former board members that controlled Kensington prior to 2016 have an ongoing campaign of misinformation concerning the matrix evaluation, lawn signs, to keep our police independent. Part of the problem was that they were too damn independent. They say that they need a police chief. Well, we've gone through a whole bunch of them, and for at least 10 to 12 years, we were defending the indefensible about what this police chief was doing. So simply getting somebody who has qualifications doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to solve the dysfunctional situation that exists in our current police force. The ordinance that was accepted in 2009 is a poison pill ordinance. It complicates resolving the issues of what to do with our police services. All Kensington residents want dedicated, highly professional, local police services that are fiscally sustainable, and to this end, the KPPCSD board, the board majority, hired a highly qualified general manager who is given excellent advice in an unbiased manner. He has no dog in this fight. He is giving unbiased advice. The police department has not had professionalism for a long time, and this was pointed out clearly by the Matrix report, and it has been solidified, documented, and made perfectly clear by the behavior of this police department. Their actions speak louder than all of the words and all of the propaganda that has been put forth on this podium. All of this mismanagement and all of this controversy has sullied the reputation of this community. The Matrix report is nothing more than an evaluation. We can do whatever the hell we want. But to ignore their professional advice is to continue the nonsense that has occurred in this community for the last 25 years. We need to end it. We need to end it now. So the board is trying to move forward on the basis of this sound advice in our best interest, with no particular conflict of interest that I can discern, to provide the services that a community of supposedly highly educated, honest, law-abiding citizens want and deserve. But so long as we spend most of our time talking about picayune issues, it demeans this community, and it demeans some of the participants who are raising some of these issues that verge on the ridiculous or childish and ill-considered. So let's have a bit of patience. What is the old guard in this community concerned about? What is it that they don't want moving forward? I keep asking for 20 years, and I guess I'm a slow learner despite the fact that I have multiple degrees. What the hell does the old guard want?
Thank you very much. Okay.
That's,
Yeah,
we're at 10:30.
Yeah.
No,
I'm
we're at
going to move to adjourn because it's over 10:30. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay. And the vote?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
I feel like that I would like to extend the meeting until 10:35 so that Mr. Bates can finish his comments. You waited and.
I'll second
I
that.
didn't realize he was waiting. I'll
Yes,
second that as well.
yes. No, I'm not.
All right. So there's a motion to extend the meeting to 10:35. Was there a second? Yeah.
I'll second it.
Okay. And all those in favor say
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right.
First thing is, I hope that when you listen to Bill, I've worked with architects on the previous thing, on the building. They have a limited scope of what they monitor. I work with them in reconstruction and remodel projects, and they have a limited scope. So again, I would encourage the board to think about some sort of a community PM project manager. And two, part of my thing is having to deal with the comments that were made earlier. And being a Richmond kid, didn't grow up in the best neighborhood, I kind of get a little, I think it's a little disingenuous to feel that crime is going rampant here in Kensington between the second and seventh place, safest city in California, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of strange that we're complaining about the police constantly. And I just wanted to address the interim board of directors, no offense. Well, we keep calling Chief Hull interim chief of police. I find that offensive and disrespectful. I think that he stepped up the 3 times that I know of to fill the job that nobody else wanted to take when we needed him to fill in the hole. So there's a whole bunch of rumors and crap that goes on here that's just amazing to me. Get jobs, don't make Kensington your job, get a job and go out and do something else, because Kensington should not be your hobby. The point is that being disrespectful to our police officers, has there been things done wrong? Yeah. And for a personal nature, I don't know, let's do a raise of hands. Who's had their dad arrested in front of their house? Okay? Who's had their dad arrested in front of their house? Yeah, hello. Arrested in front of their house in Kensington. Who's had an officer threaten to arrest him for standing on his own property? Anybody? Hello? I don't harbor any ill will to the police officers. I harbored ill will to the guy who did it, but not to our police force. In general, our police force does a good job. My wife walks around at 2 in the morning because she can't sleep. They say hi. Where do you get that anyplace else? Here. It's a safe community. We watch out for each other. If there's something wrong, fix it. If we don't have a guy that has management skills, let's give him the skills. He obviously knows everybody. And every time we look for somebody, what happens? They go away because we're a bunch of idiots. Okay? They can't stand it here. Well, we got a guy that fills in every time. So let's be civil. Even, tonight I've seen a lot of dissension. This is ridiculous. You guys are talking about stuff back and forth and interrupting yourselves. I mean, this is amazing. Let's be civil. Let's get off the harm and hangover, which was my term. Let's move on. Those things in the past, let's try to put them in the past.
Thank you. Okay. All right. 30 seconds. Yeah.
15 if you want to
I
give
think
us-
everybody knows my name's Larry Nagel, and I'm one of the directors of the fire district. And I've been waiting here to request that you put on the agenda for your next meeting, let us make a presentation to you as to the present status of the public safety building and our construction. I'm sure Director Modavi will understand after that presentation there is no money in the fire district to give to you guys to make a community center. We're trying to build a essential services fire safety building for emergency preparedness, and we want to talk to you about that and give you an update. So if you could please put us on the agenda. It's been a wonderful 3.5 hours here, so thank you very much.
I know, Larry, and I didn't have a dog leave with you tonight. So, okay.
Very briefly, I hear that Kensington has solved all of El Cerrito's crime. I would like to know exactly what all that crime is. Okay? We have a lot of people who are throwing words around here. I'd like some facts for a change. I would also like to hear from somebody who will tell me why Peel's articles are all full of lies. Okay? Give us some facts for a change.
Okay.
How's that for transparency?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
And I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Your hair looks great.